slightly mad. I'm going slightly mad.
Hello, Aloysius. Hello, everybody. How are you? Well, are we back with more information about our book? We're back with an update for our book. Yes, we've been writing. We have? Yeah, what did you call all that? A lot of sitting in front of the... Yes, there was a lot of sitting in front of the computer. Not a lot of words. Oh, yes, but the words are quality, not quantity. We don't worry about quality. We worry about quality, not quantity, Aloysius here. So anyway, I am here with another book update. I haven't had one for a while, and I thought you might all be wondering how we've been going. So that's what I have for this week. But before we get to that, remember there's our shop. Yes, our shop where we have books and writing services. There's also our Redbubble shop where we have over 100 designs. And if you would like to support us, that is where you support us, don't you? Yes, that's where you support us. If you want to support us and you don't want to spend any money, yeah, I know some people don't want to spend any money, and that is entirely fine. No, they're not. No. It is entirely fine not to have to spend any money. Like, subscribe, comment, and share these videos. And that is absolutely something that we love people doing. So, what have we been getting up to with our book? You've been spending a lot of time sitting at the computer. Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time sitting at the computer. Yes, because that is part of it. Yes. And you started writing stuff that you weren't planning on writing. Yeah, that's part of it too, isn't it? That's a big part of any writing project. You think, I have an idea, I have a vision, I know what I'm going to do, and then you go, oh, actually, I need this. Yes. And then I need this, and then this requires a whole lot of research. Oh boy, this requires a whole lot of research that we did not even contemplate having. But if we don't have this, the whole thing won't exactly work. No, it would not work. It would not work as well as what we are wanting it to do, would it? No, it would not. So what happened is I had my plan for the narrative, and then I realized I'd worked out all the chapters. I'd worked out what goes into all the chapters. I think to myself, I've got all the research done and I know what I'm going to do and it's all planned out. And then you realize, oh, that's not got that. I need a way into the story. And to get a way into the story, I need to create this other character that I'd never thought of. Yes, this other character. And what that meant was that required a whole load of emergency research. Well, research that I hadn't intended on doing. It was stuff that I had no idea that I was going to be doing. And so then you end up doing things like, what sorts of names do English pubs have? Can you change the names of an English pub? Exactly when did the Battle of Britain happen? And exactly when did the Blitz happen in London? And yada, 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 yada. And where could I send someone that isn't the Western Front? These are all questions I had to ask myself. Yeah? Really? Yes. Huge numbers of questions. And so every time I sat down to write, I would have to stop and look something up. And sometimes this was every sentence had something that needed looking up. Every sentence. Yes, that is why I have been sitting there and working, but not getting a lot of words on the page, because I'm not the kind of person who likes to rewrite. What I like to do is write it and then edit it and polish it up. But I like that what I put on the page to be as close as humanly possible to what ends up in the final book. I'm not really fond, because I take a long time writing. I'd rather quality over quantity. And I'm not really fond of the idea of just churn out an entire manuscript, don't care about the quality, and then rework it and rework it and rework it. I can't think of anything more tedious. That's my process. That doesn't have to be your process. But my process, I do not like rewrites and rewrites and rewrites and rewrites. I try to do a lot of that troubleshooting well beforehand, and then try to get that as close as possible. It's not, it's not perfect, but it is as close as possible, and then I can polish rather than rewrite and rewrite. I sort of consider it's like cutting stone. Yeah, I consider it more like cutting stone or carving something. I'm trying to get that shape right, and then it's refine, because you sort of get one go at marble. Yeah, you get one go at marble. So that's my process. So it's taken me ages to get this first chapter finished or nearly finished. We're going to do some writing. Yes, we're going to do some writing soon. While I've got the days off that I've got from work, we're going to do some writing, and I should be able to knock off this chapter. That sounds good. Yes. And so what else have I been doing? Actually, the thing that I wanted to talk about for this video is I wanted to talk about satire. Satire. Yes, satire. Now, we've done a lot of satire. We have, haven't we? We have done a lot of satire, partly because Her Ladyship really, really likes 18th century satirical writers. Yes, she does. Yes, she does indeed. But we are all a little bit partial to some satire. And as one of the major inspirations for this book was the life of Brian, this is it's the life of Brian plus the 18th century satirists. And we have liked satire so long. I can't tell you how young I was watching Yes Minister. I didn't necessarily understand it, but I watched it. I was a weird child, just a very weird child. So I have been watching satire and satirical things. You were a weird child. Yes, I was a weird child. I've been watching satire and satirical things for a very long time. So I've been thinking about this. Yes. I also wanted to talk about this because I wanted to talk about the limits of it. There are limits. Yes, there are very huge limits. And because satire seems to be a very misunderstood form. So part of the working out the limits of satire is last weekend I spent too many hours. And I actually got bored because it doesn't get better. It doesn't become more persuasive the more you listen to it. It becomes less persuasive the more you listen to it. But I spent a lot of time watching videos made by the Edward de Vere people. The weird Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare thing. Yeah, the weird Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare people. So I watched a bunch of their videos. Is this relevant? Yes, it's very relevant to what we're doing. I wasn't just being incredibly masochistic. It felt incredibly masochistic after a point. But I was looking at them because I've also been looking at J. Thomas Looney, because of my book. Yes. So I've been looking at that, and what struck me with these people, the de Vere people, yes, the de Vere people, is I watched one video or a couple of videos and I am literally shouting at it, that is not how you do scholarship. No, it's not. I have a history degree. That's not how you do scholarship. That's not how it works. It like literally does not work like that. That is not how you research things. The throwing out of evidence, the twisting, the absolute twisting things in diabolical shapes to make them fit because you've decided something initially and then you are going to twist everything to fit that. Yeah, that's not how scholarship works. No, that's not how scholarship works. It is not how history scholarship works. Now, I know that history scholarship is not a hard science. It's a bit dicky, and historiography will give you a whole load of history, which is in itself fascinating, and that history is full of biases and all sorts of things, that there is poor scholarship that has gone on before because of using different lenses, all these sorts of things. I'm not going to say that history is this perfect science, but there is a methodology behind it, and these people are not using it. They are not using it. I've never seen anything quite so... What's a polite way of saying this? Misguided. Misguided. No, we're not going to say that. Why not? Because cuckoo bananas is not polite. Misguided. I've never seen anything so misguided, unless you start to go down the realm of conspiracy theorists and moon landing didn't happen type of... Like, it sits at that level. That's really, yeah, it's really, I watch quite a lot because I was like, does this get better? Oh, it gets worse. It gets so much worse, and it is not persuasive in the least. The more you hear it, especially if you have a background, the less persuasive this is. It is possibly persuasive to somebody who is entirely ignorant. Okay, so that is what I spent far too many hours looking at last weekend. Yes, we literally had to clear our YouTube history just to get rid of them because it was then propagating itself, and it was getting a bit. Yeah, we need to clean that out. I don't want to be plagued by these people forever. So. It was a pretty big deep dive. But what became very apparent was that they were unsatirizable. 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 They could be mocked, they could be parodied, but they could not be satirized. Why is that? Okay, so this is what I want to talk about. Satire is an incredibly specific kind of comedy. And one of the big things about satire that people don't understand, because I felt I wanted to talk about this partly because I'm writing satire and learning as I go writing satire, because I've never done this before, but also because the number of people who will do a funny skit, a funny skit that people get offended by, and then they say, oh, it's satire, and it's like, no, that's not satire. That's not how satire works. So I thought I would talk about how satire works. Satire is about power. Satire works by laughing at power. Satire is extremely old. Satire goes back to the ancient Greek theatre. So it is very, very old. It is a form of comedy that requires urban living, because it generally pokes fun at politics. Yes, it pokes fun at politics, and satire is a measure of the level of freedom and education in a country, which is really quite fascinating, because when you look at great satire, the great satirists of the 18th century are urban, educated, and writing for an increasingly literate and therefore educated and engaged audiences. They are writing things, these pamphlets, all of these things that Swift and Pope and Stern and others, Fielding, are doing, is they are writing and engaging with the world. So you need to be engaged with the world, you need to be educated, and you need to have enough political freedom to get away with that. It is actually a sign of a healthy democracy that people can poke fun at it. Really? Yeah, it is. There are, when we think now of satire, the other thing, and I think her ladyship went into this, satire dates. Not everything survives. So, but then some things just don't date terribly. I have been watching Yes Minister again. I'm up to the 3rd series now. And aside from some elements of some episodes, not many, there's a couple, the 2nd episode of the 1st series has a couple of bits in it that it's like, that haven't dated well. But the majority of it, because it is an imaginary government department, and it's the battle between the MP and the minister and the civil service, those things are pretty much across the board for any government sort of world. They work over and over and over again. Humphrey Appleby is funny because he uses civil service speak. Everything he says is opaque because he has been a civil servant for so long. That's how he talks now. He talks in civil service-ese. That becomes satirical and it's recognizable. It crosses from in English world to a Australian world because we have a very similar, the same parliamentary system and the same sort of setup. Conversely, one of the great satires that Australia produced was The Games, which is all about the organising of the Sydney Olympic Games, which if you can see it, it's a scream. But it's about bureaucracy. It's about dealing with a whole load of different things and being these people who are trying to put this thing together. And it's very brilliantly written and it's very funny and it's very fast-paced. And, just because it's got one context doesn't mean that nuance wouldn't apply across contexts. And there's The Life of Brian, which is a satire. But it's not a satire of the thing that people accuse it of being a satire of. People got really upset viewing it and seeing it as a satire of Jesus. No, it's a satire of religion. That's still going to upset people, but it's about religion. It's about the way that people behave within religion, the all sorts of different elements of that. Yes. And Americans are not so great at this. I hate to tell you, Americans do not really get satire, which is unfortunate because if satire is saying something about the health of a democracy, then the fact that you have a country that is not working satire well means that it's probably missing a couple of those components of education, healthy democracy. That's not a good thing. But one of the great American satires, there aren't that many of them, one of the great ones is Dr. Strangelove. And what do all of these have in common? What do all of these have in common? They're laughing at power. They're kicking up. And that is where, When people say, oh, it was satire, the reason why it doesn't work and it doesn't land, because satire is really hard to work, is really hard to make it land, is that they're kicking down. There's a big difference between kicking up and where the satirist has less power than their target, and kicking down when the satirist has more power with their target. If you're kicking down, you are just a bully. If you're kicking up, it's satire. Now, there are different types, aren't there? Yeah, there are the two big types, and these are really the two ways that you will probably encounter it, and that is biting satire. And biting satire includes people like Jonathan Swift, where we can still understand the point. Biting satire doesn't necessarily have to make you laugh. That's the other thing. It's about poking fun, but also making people think. And it can be misinterpreted. In Pope, Alexander Pope will also write biting satire. His is a little bit politer than Swift's, but is still very biting satire. In fact, in the Dunciad, the queen, the goddess of dullness, has all of arts and sciences chained beneath her. Tragedy is being vaguely held up by her sister history, and comedy is being kept alive by her sister satire. Pope does not see satire as a healthy form of comedy. Comedy is supposed to be cathartic. Satire is generally having a different purpose. It doesn't have the same cathartic quality that pure tragedy has or pure comedy has. A room full of people laughing together or a room full of people moved together is far more powerful than just kicking at power. But if all you can do is kick at power, then that's what you do. And that is what why Pope has that satire alone is representing comedy in this world of dullness in the Dunciad. So Swift, Pope, they're very biting satirists. Something like Yes Minister is biting satire. Dr. Strangelove is biting satire. Life of Brian is biting satire. Clark and Dorr are biting satire. Barry Humphries can do biting satire. Dame Edna, or Edna, Mrs. Everidge, is biting satire about a particular type of Australia that was dominant in the 50s and 60s when that character was developed. Dame Edna sort of became a parody once that character became very, very famous and went to America. It lost a lot of its satirical edge, but it is in essence a satirical character, and Barry Humphries is in essence a satirist. Max Gillies is another Australian satirist, really biting satire. A lot of this stuff is political and a lot of it dates, which is one of the elements of biting satire. But it doesn't date as badly as the other kind of satire, and that's much more gentle satire. You see a really gentle sort of satire in She Stoops to Conquer, Goldsmith. Goldsmith is a much gentler satirist than his contemporaries in the 18th century, or not his contemporaries, but the other 18th century satirists. Oliver Goldsmith is much gentler. And his satire is very social in nature. Another gentler satirist is Anthony Trollope. I watched the Barchester Chronicles. Again, for the book, that's why I was watching them. But that's a much gentler satire, and as a result, that looking at that 150 years or more after it was written, it sort of has no edge. And actually, I got kind of bored. Like I did get bored during it. Even though I have watched it before, it's well acted, it's beautifully made, but I kind of lost interest in it because the thing that was supposed to have the edge, the thing that was supposed to make it amusing, make these characters ridiculous, wasn't there. So it's gentle satire. It's not really going for it the same way that someone like Swift does. Another one who is technically does write some satire, but it's been entirely lost or glossed over in the intervening 200 years is Jane Austen. Jane Austen, there are elements of especially something like Emma that are highly satirical, but it's so gentle. It's such a gentle satire that it lost any bite that it has, and now they're just, I mean, I hate to say it, but part of the reason I find Jane Austen dull is that they're pretty stories about romance and marriage in the Regency period. I mean, I read them, but I need years between books. I'm not the kind of person who's going to get really, Jane Austen, I just can't. I feel like I'm reading the same book over and over again. If it were more satirical, now, what about Vanity Fair? Vanity Fair is definitely in the more biting end of satire, because you read Vanity Fair and you can see the sorts of social climbing, grasping behaviour that, yes, this is set in Napoleonic London, but during the Napoleonic era, but it's still satirical. It still works. It's still got its viciousness. Like, you could update Vanity Fair today and it would still work. Yes. So gentle satire has a tendency to become a bit toothless over time. So it is quite a difficult form of comedy to write. So why are you trying? I'm trying because it is a challenge. I've never written comedy before, and I am working on this because the work itself is partly inspired by different elements as we have discussed. Yes. It's not just a single thing. It's not, I think I will write this. I don't ever work like that. I usually need some form of framing because I'm writing literary fiction. And literary fiction isn't just a story. No, literary fiction isn't just a story. So there is that ability to really poke fun at things. Now, I'm in a pretty good position to write satire. Why is that? I'm female. Yes. I'm from a colony, a former colony. Yes. And I'm writing back to the colonizer and to men. They are my targets. My targets are men and the colonizer. Yes. They have more power than me. Yes. So it doesn't matter how savage I am, I can kick them. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm not in any position to bully that. I can't bully power and privilege, but I can laugh at power and privilege. And that is the power of satire, is that you can make points. The idea is make them laugh and then make them think. Make people laugh and make them think. But at the same time, the greatest definition of satire, of biting satire that I've ever seen, is laughing with knives. It's about making people laugh, but then really sticking it to power. Yeah. So that's what we're having fun with at the moment. We'll be back whenever we have another update. I'm not sure who's next. We'll leave it as a surprise. I don't think it will be Caesar. No, not Caesar. No, not Caesar. It won't be Caesar. It'll be somebody with a book. Possibly Laura, or possibly her ladyship. It depends on who reads something faster. Yes. Have we thought of what Laura's doing? I don't think Laura has thought of what she's doing, so it'll probably be her ladyship. It'll probably be her ladyship, but we don't know. We never know. But Her Infernal Majesty and Janice and Otterline have recently had a video, so I think it'll have to be either her ladyship or Laura. Anyway, that's all for us. Come back again, and we're back again. We will have another update. There'll be another video next week, of course. And until then, bye-bye. Der Wolkenfinger, ich bin ja Jesus. Bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.